Joining us now to talk about all this, the former police commissioner of New York City, Bernard Kerik. Bernard, of course, also the author of the book From Jailer to Jailed. Bernie, we really appreciate your time tonight on Newsmax Prime to talk about this. According to NBC News and other media outlets, the four teenagers, as Miranda mentioned, will be charged with committing a hate crime. We can see their pictures here, but aside from going through the charges, what I thought was interesting was initially on the part of Chicago officials, there was a reluctance to call this a hate crime. We heard the top cop in Chicago say, well, it was stupidity. Eddie Johnson, and we'll hear from him later, but I'm just interested in your initial reaction to all of this.
Well, I think it's sickening. I think it's barbaric. When you watch that, anybody that watches that video, if you don't get sick to your stomach, then there's something wrong with you. You wouldn't want that done to any child anywhere in this country. Regardless of color. It's just a barbaric, brutal, and graphic, attack on a young man for nothing. And JD, we keep calling these, the four perpetrators, teenagers. If I'm not mistaken, two of them were 18, but two of them are in their mid-20s. These aren't young kids that made a mistake. These aren't kids that, did something stupid. These are evil-minded young men and women that went out and committed a heinous, heinous crime and should be held accountable at the harshest levels.
Now, Bernie, I made mention of Eddie Johnson earlier, the superintendent of the Chicago PD. Last night, he talked about stupidity. Late this afternoon, there was a press conference where the charges were brought forth, saying this would be investigated and treated as a hate crime. Let us listen now to the words of Superintendent Eddie Johnson of the Chicago Police.
Let me be very clear. The actions in that video are reprehensible. That, along with racism, have absolutely no place in the city of Chicago or anywhere else for that matter against anyone, regardless of their race, gender, state of mental health, or any other identifying factor. There was never a question whether or not this incident qualified to be investigated as a hate crime, but as I said yesterday, we need to base the investigation based on facts and not emotion.
Bernie, is there any doubt in your mind that had the situation been reversed, white perpetrators and a black man, that the whole description of this from the get-go, from the initial briefing of last night, would have been that as a hate crime? And what about Eddie saying that, comma, along with racism? It sounds as if he's not including racism, that it's something separate. Again, some of that 70s thought that somehow the African-American community is immune from committing racism.
Well, look, I can't talk for Eddie Johnson, and I do know, he's under the gun in Chicago. They had the worst crime issue last year than I guess going back 2 decades. 762 homicides, 4,331 shootings. He's under the gun. I think one of the problems, whether this was the issue with him in that initial statement, chiefs and mayors and governors around this country have got to stop trying to be so politically correct. They've got to call things what they are. They can't cower to the press and media and worry about the left-wing liberals that are going to come out and attack you. I think it was pretty clear watching that video. One time, for me, it was racial. It was a hate crime. It was barbaric. It was horrific. And I think anybody in my profession, anybody that's been in law enforcement, anybody with a heart would have to believe the same thing.
It's curious, Bernie. CNN anchor Don Lemon last night, fresh off his infamous New Year's Eve appearance, taking shots of alcohol at a bar in New Orleans and having his ear pierced. Last night, when this story first came out, he actually said during his program that what happened last night was not based on evil. Let's look and listen.
I don't think it's evil. I don't think it's evil. I think these are young people, and I think they have bad home training. I think that when I say who is raising these young people, I have no idea who's raising these young people, because no one I know on earth who is 17 years old or 70 years old would ever think of treating another person like that. It is inhumane, and you wonder at 18 years old, where's your parent?
Now, there it is, Bernie, this indulgence.
Listen,
they're kids, says Don Lemon.
You know, listen, I disagree and I agree. Where are their parents? Where are their parents? You know, the home training, homeschooling, where's the discipline? Where's the respect for another human being? Where is the good and bad? But I would definitely disagree. They're evil. Watch the video. That's all you have to do is watch the video. I urge people to watch the video. You're only going to want to watch it once. Watch the video. These kids were evil. The attack on this young man was barbaric, and they should be held accountable.
Bernie, only about 45 seconds. That scarcely does justice, pardon the pun, to that great op-ed you wrote for Newsmax.com, where you outlined how you believe President Trump could end that savage crime wave in Chicago. 30 seconds. Give us the high points of this, Bernie.
Well, I think all he has to do is encourage mayors and governors around the country to learn from the lessons of New York City, when New York City had 2,000 homicides in 1994 and dropped the homicide rate 70% over the 8-year period during Rudy Giuliani's first and second term. Bloomberg carried on those reductions, and we surpassed national trends for crime reduction, bigger and greater than anybody else in the country. Unparalleled changes.
Bottom line is they ought to follow that New York example. Forgive me for interrupting, Bernie. Our time grows short. We thank you for your time, and we're back with more after this.